The wind rattled the windows of the old schoolhouse, as if the walls themselves were straining to hold. A wooden table stood in the center, scratched and stained from years of use. On it lay the still body of a young woman in a high-necked dress, her dark hair spread across the planks. Lanterns flickered with every draft, throwing shadows against the pale faces of the doctors bent over her. At the edge of the room, her mother stood stiff and unblinking, fingers twisted together until her knuckles turned white. Near the door, the husband paced, muttering and trembling, eyes darting but never resting on the corpse. One doctor slid his hands beneath her head. When he lifted, the neck gave way too easily. The movement was wrong. Broken. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the sharp breath of her mother. She had begged for this examination. She had said her daughter would reveal the truth, even from the grave. Just a month earlier, in January of 1897, a boy named Anderson Jones trudged along the frozen road near Livesey's Mill in Greenbrier County, West Virginia. He had been sent to check on 23-year-old Elva Zona Heaster Shue, known to most simply as Zona. She had married a blacksmith, Erasmus Trout Shue, only a few months before. When the boy pushed the door open, the fire inside had burned low. At the foot of the staircase, Zona lay motionless, one hand outstretched on the floorboards, eyes wide and fixed. Anderson froze, then sprinted from the house in panic. Neighbors rushed in, followed later by Dr. George Knapp, the county physician. Hours had passed. By the time he arrived, Trout Shue had already taken over. He washed and dressed his wife himself, which was unusual. That task usually fell to women of the community. He chose a stiff, high-collared gown and wrapped a bright scarf around her throat, claiming it had been her favorite. At the wake, he clutched her body tightly, keeping her head propped against his chest. Whenever someone drew near, he shifted, sobbed loudly, or snapped in anger. The doctor tried to examine the body, but Trout's grief and his aggressive refusal to step aside left him little room. Knapp recorded the death as an everlasting faint, later amended to complications of childbirth, though Zona was not pregnant. Within days, the young wife was buried in the hilltop cemetery, but her mother, Mary Jane Heaster, could not let it rest. She had never liked the blacksmith. Something about him had set her teeth on edge from the beginning. After the funeral, she took home a sheet that had been tucked under her daughter's head in the coffin. When she washed it, the water turned red, as if the cloth itself bled. No matter how often she boiled or scrubbed, the stain would not fade. She hung the sheet on the line, convinced it was a sign. Soon after, she said her daughter appeared to her in the night. For 4 nights in a row, Mary Jane claimed, Zona's ghost came to the foot of her bed. The air turned cold. The figure was clear, solid, not a shadow or a dream. Her daughter spoke of anger and violence, of hands around her throat. She said her neck had been broken. To prove it, she turned her head full circle before fading into the dark. On the 4th night, Mary Jane rose before dawn, certain she had been given the truth. She walked into town and demanded the authorities act. She went straight to the county prosecutor, John Alfred Preston. She told him everything, from the stained sheet to the nightly visits. Preston did not record ghost testimony, but he listened closely. He noted the incomplete medical exam, the husband's strange behavior, the scarf and stiff collar, the rumors about his violent past, and the mother's unshakable certainty. It was enough for him to order Zona's body exhumed. On a raw February morning, inside that cold schoolhouse near the cemetery, 3 doctors worked for hours. They stripped away the high collar and scarf. What they found was impossible to ignore. Bruises, dark and distinct, encircled her throat. Her windpipe was crushed. Muscles were torn. The neck was broken clean between the 1st and 2nd vertebrae. It was no feint. It was murder. Trout Shue was arrested. On the ride to jail in Lewisburg, he spoke freely, too freely. His story of when he had last seen Zona and how he had found her body shifted with each telling. As investigators dug deeper, his history surfaced. He had been married twice before. One wife divorced him for cruelty. The other died suddenly. Neighbors recalled hearing him boast that he planned to have 7 wives before his life was done. No one laughed at the remark now. When the trial opened that June, Greenbrier County packed into the courtroom. The prosecutor built his case carefully, leaning on what could be proven: the autopsy findings, the bruises, the broken neck, and the husband's erratic behavior. He called neighbors who had seen the strange control Trout kept during the wake, and the doctor who admitted he had been prevented from doing his job properly. The prosecutor never mentioned the ghost. The defense did. They called Mary Jane Heaster to the stand and tried to pick apart her story. They pressed her about the visions, asking if she had dreamed them, if she had mistaken imagination for reality. They hoped to make her appear unstable. But Mary Jane never flinched. She told the jury exactly what she had seen: her daughter standing at the foot of the bed, describing the attack, and turning her head fully around to show the broken neck. She said it was not a dream. It was her child speaking the truth. The judge instructed the jury that they could weigh her testimony like any other. The ghost had entered the court record. In the end, it was the medical evidence and Trout Shue's own contradictions that carried the most weight. The autopsy was clear. The bruises and the snapped neck matched the mother's story too closely to dismiss. After only an hour's deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty. Trout Shue was sentenced to life in the state penitentiary at Moundsville. He would serve only 3 years. In 1900, during an epidemic that swept the prison, he died and was buried in the prison cemetery. Mary Jane Heaster returned to her home in the hills, certain that justice had been done. She never wavered in telling her story. She said her daughter had come to her and spoken the truth, and the court had listened. Some neighbors believed her completely. Others said the ghost was never needed, that the facts alone convicted the man. But all agreed that without her persistence, Zona's death would have been forgotten, written off as a fainting spell. Today, a roadside marker near the cemetery calls it the only known case in which the testimony of a ghost helped to convict a murderer. Historians note that the verdict rested on evidence that could be examined and cross-checked. Yet without Mary Jane's insistence, without her nightly visions and her refusal to let the matter drop, the case might never have been reopened. The story remains because it bridges 2 worlds: the firm ground of law and the unshakable faith of a grieving mother. Zona Heaster rests in the quiet cemetery near the Greenbrier Hills. Visitors still come to read the marker and wonder. Some leave believing the dead can speak. Others see only the power of a mother's love refusing to be silenced. Either way, the Greenbrier ghost endures, a tale carried forward from a winter night in 1897, when truth seemed to rise from the grave. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories, if you dare.